This video is brought to you by War Thunder. Moby Dick is a book about a crew of men that set out to hunt a giant sperm whale. The tale is beautiful and strange and insane. Some of its chapters turn into sea shanties. Other ones are about where a whale's skins ends and a whale's blubber begins. Even the different kinds of ropes that you should put on a harpoon, and even a chapter that questions the cosmic meaning behind the color white. But if you look really closely, you'll soon come to realize that all of this is a metaphor of something. Its narrator Ishmael starts this story by addressing a strange phenomenon that occurs between humans and the ocean. He believes that there are some of us who are born to be magnetically obsessed with it. It's where the compass of their soul seems to always be pointing at. To them, the ocean is the blue ink that writes the mysteries of this planet, filled with invisible patterns that lie deep within this vast creature. Millions have sought to understand it, and few have ever come back to tell the tale. The story continues with Ishmael admitting that he is, in fact, one of those people. Often he finds himself staring off into the horizon, believing that out there he'll uncover some part of himself that has always been missing. A question gets asked before he sets foot in New Bedford, Massachusetts. What will I find in this great blue ocean? The opening scene to the anime Blue Lock starts with a soccer match that is in its last and final minute. Its story gets told from the perspective of a young boy named Isagi, who dreams of one day getting a chance to play in the World Cup. Currently, Isagi's team is down 0-1, but he soon becomes met with an opportunity to change all that. With the clock counting down to its last second, the ball gets passed to him. A second later, he manages to find himself in the best position possible. In front of him is a cage, and to the right of him is a player. In soccer, this is the most advantageous scenario you could be in. If this was chess, then it was basically the leading step before a checkmate. If this was basketball, then it'd be like making a wide open layup. Confidence tells Isagi that he should just go take the shot himself. The goalie looks hesitant. A pool of fear swims within his eyes. The glory that would come with scoring the tying goal in this match would leave him to be remembered by his high school in the same vein as Alexander the Great. They would sing songs and make statues out of this moment. His fundamentals, however, disagree with this idea. Since the first day that he put on a pair of cleats, Isagi has been ingrained to believe one single philosophy, that soccer is a team sport. A person cannot ever win in this game if they ever act selfish, and so with this logic, he comes to the conclusion that there is only one single correct play to make here. Rather than shooting, he hits the ball with his left foot. It makes perfect contact with his teammate's right cleat. Everything has aligned itself perfectly. His teammate is now staring down a wide open cage. It is the simplest goal you could possibly score in all of mankind. If this was Counter-Strike, then it'd be like defusing the bomb when you're the last person alive. If this was Rocket League, it'd be like dribbling the ball into an open net. It is a shot that is so easy, so incredibly, ridiculously free that in Isagi's mind, he is already deciding on whether or not he should either do the fish celebration or the one where you slide on your knees. With only 10 seconds remaining on the clock, the teammate goes to take the shot, and with grace, like an eagle taking flight, like a leopard gliding across the Sahara, and like a proboscis monkey existing, his teammate proceeds to beautifully miss the goal. The bell goes off, the game is lost, the season is over, and to Isagi, the world is over. A question plants its seed within his mind. Why the fuck did I pass the ball? And from then on, a new animal was born. This is how the first 4 minutes of the anime goes down. It's an anime that I watched years ago by complete coincidence. At the time, I used it as an excuse for my friend and I to hop on calls and hang out. Distance made it hard for us to catch up often, so we figured that a show like this was an easy thing to look forward to on the weekends. But once those first 4 minutes of events had passed, it almost felt like I was about to go through catharsis. Soccer was a sport that I used to play as a kid. I was a Cuban child that grew up in Germany, so it was only natural that it doesn't matter. But back when I played, I was hot ass, steaming meat, scorching cheeks. It's a sport that I've always cared deeply about, but never actually wanted to play. The main sport I used to care a lot about and competed in until my sophomore year of college was aquatic wrestling ball. You wouldn't know what it is. But all this to say that the sport itself couldn't have been a reason for me to care about this show. No. There was something that lied deep within the cracks of what I just saw, deep within the valleys of that horrific moment of his teammate missing the shot. Something about it had unveiled tunnels to a cave of memories that I thought I had forgotten long ago. It felt like this moment was something that I had become binded by, a fate chosen for me by a person that I can no longer remember. Something was hidden within the depths of this supposed blue lock, and thuseth the only way through is by attempting to uncover these mysteries. On that night, Isagi goes on to replay that moment over and over again, envisioning a world where he existed in a different timeline, one where the game had evened out at 1-1 and then eventually became 2-1. In this world, he imagines a great big statue would have been built upon his high school campus. The statue would be made out of gold, standing 15 meters high, with him juggling the head of his enemies. But instead, he is fated by the tides of destiny to be stuck within this timeline, as an idiot, as a dumbass bitch-ass loser, as a person who can no longer play soccer. Soon, the fates provide him with yet another option. In the mail, he finds a letter. The letter contains an invitation to a new program called Blue Lock. He goes to tell his parents about it. He says, "Mother, Father, I am leaving for Blue Lock." They say, "But son, how long will you expect to be gone for?" He responds, "Possibly many months." The parents raise an eyebrow. "But son, what of school?" But before they could finish, he was already gone. The show then cuts to a scene of Isagi setting foot in front of a building. Next to him, he stumbles across another person, the worst person possible. Wearing an annoying tracksuit that matches his annoying face, he recognizes that this person is the same star player from the same team that ended his season. But unlike our main protagonist, he appears to feel no ill will about what happened that day. As a matter of fact, he's kind. The boy is charming and bright and smiles in a way that makes you feel seen. At the end of the day, it was just a game. Sometimes people win and sometimes people lose. A flower begins to bloom within Isagi, and together, in this blissful alliance that they have formed within the span of 5 seconds, the two of them enter the building. Inside, they come across a room filled with animals, hairstyles of all shapes and sizes, faces that are mean and cruel, standing at the top of a totem pole that must be, at the minimum, 5'9", which in Japanese is like 6'4". But soon, this sea of noise begins to dry out. A strange-looking man enters the stage. He is long and droopy, wearing black khakis and a face you'd want to punch. The man goes by the name of Ego, which, if you look closely, is a metaphor. Fellas, I don't know about you, but I am not a pilot. I don't have a license to fly planes, nor do I have a license to drive big giant vehicles, let alone my own vehicle. But now imagine for a second that you didn't have to go to flight school for 7 years. Imagine you could do all of those things on a computer, on a console, or even on your phone. War Thunder is a free game that runs as the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. You can play, fly, and drive as models that each have their own individual components, simulating hitboxes that work like the real thing. Engines, fuels, tanks, and weapons. Recently, they just added an all-new mobile version that you can play on iOS and Android. I hate my phone, and I also hate social media, so at least within that pool of digital poison, you can now just play some games with your friends instead. The barrier for entry on this free game is as simple as it gets. You don't need a fancy graphics card or a set of hardware that's worth about as much as a mansion. Using the link that's pinned in the comments as well as the video description, you can grab a massive bonus package on PC and consoles that includes in-game currency, multiple premium vehicles, an account boost for a week, and much more. It's available for both new users and those who haven't played in the last 6 months. All this available for a limited time only. Now we can go back to the video. Ego then goes on to present the main thesis of Blue Lock. The men who stand in this room are the top 300 strikers in Japan. Each of those players have likely been guided by dreams. Those dreams are vast. Some wish to play professionally, others want to compete in the World Cup. But to Ego, these dreams stand far beneath him. Since the dawn of Japanese soccer, not once have they proven themselves to be anything but below subpar. Not once has a superstar been born from within their land. Not once has their country performed well nationally, and worst of all, not once, throughout all of history have they ever come near a World Cup trophy. Ego believes that greatness does not come served in a restaurant of mediocrity, and in order for a star player to be born, the country itself is in need of a revolution. This is the idea he proposes. For centuries, soccer has been honored as the most selfless team sport. It is a game where 22 players stand on a field of grass. Each side has 11 players, and each team contains a set of forwards, midfielders, defenders, and a goalie. These positions are like instruments in a symphony. One does not ever seek to overpower the other, and each is designed to fulfill their specific role. Together, they form a harmony, one that sings melodies of a promise that the system will win you trophies. But Ego believes that there is an innate problem with this system. While many have come to hone in on this belief, there are less and less superstars being made through the garden of talent. Its ground has become ruined, leading few to ever bloom into anything special. All the youth programs ever seem to care about nowadays are stats and numbers and mindless teamwork, and as a result, Japan has become the place where inspiration goes to die. What they need instead is a revolution, a complete reconstruction of this kingdom. Japan is in need of a superstar that plays in a way that breathes life into the sport. New, selfish, irrational, beautiful, and inspiring. What Ego has done here is assemble 300 of the best goal scorers in Japan, and through a set of rigorous trials, Blue Lock will then narrow this down to the 11 most qualified candidates that will score them enough goals to win a World Cup. Once these trials have finished, these 11 players will then go on to compete against the current U20 Japanese national team, and it'll be there, within a stadium of thousands upon thousands, that Japan can determine which belief will become the future of the sport, the shield of teamwork or the spear of ego. These words and ideas exit from Ego. A silence follows. Soon, the room enters into an uproar. Hundreds of people feeling insulted by the fact that they traveled all this way to listen to someone spit on the nature of this sport they love so dearly. And not even just them, they probably also echo the feelings of the people watching this show. I watched this anime when it first came out a few years ago, and I remember us vividly rolling our eyes over this dumb notion that what kids should be doing nowadays is acting more egotistic and selfish. And so the first thought that came to mind was that this was coming from an author that just clearly wasn't that experienced in the subject matter. An anime doing anime things. A guy from Japan talking about a sport that he didn't know much about. The year prior provided me with a water polo anime, and I just remember watching that first episode wishing I could stab my thigh with a fork. But as this show progressed, I couldn't help but make note of some details that seemed to indicate otherwise. There were references to real-life players, like Eric Cantona. Who the hell makes an Eric Cantona reference in 2025? There were moments where I felt like it'd be impossible to come up with them without being about it. And then came the final straw, when a scene popped onto my screen of one of the characters referring to the others as NPCs. How is that possible? How could someone have love for the sport yet propose such a ridiculous argument that strikers ruled this world? How could he possibly think that the only thing that made the greats great was the fact that they were filled with ego? But then I become reminded of those who were the greats. I become reminded of Michael Jordan, who has literally been quoted calling himself Black Jesus. I become reminded of Tom Brady, of Muhammad Ali, of Thierry Henry, of Zidane, of Messi, of Ronaldo, wondering if the variable that they all seem to share is their potent trait of having a massive ego. I think of the time where Kobe scored 81 points, finishing his game against the Raptors with only 2 assists. I think about the game where Zlatan dribbled through 5 defenders to score this goal. Right before he shot it, there were 2 players that were wide open. 99.999% of human beings would be presented with this opportunity and obviously decide to pass there. But Zlatan Ibrahimovic didn't. His mind decided to fake the shot 1, 2, 3, 4 times and then decided to go for a goal. I think about the compilation of Suarez going for half-field long shots, a 2-minute long video of all the times that Suarez's team would manage to get a possession, pass it over to him, and witness a monstrosity. What sane person stands on a field that is shared with thousands, viewed by millions, and have the courage to go for a long shot and miss the cage by a mile? What drives a man to act this way? Is it madness? Is it lunacy? How can someone stare off into the monstrous abyss and decide to venture through it? I become reminded of Captain Ahab, who was once confronted by the great white whale Moby Dick, a day where he barely escaped the grasp of death, lost a leg, and decided from then on that he would spend the rest of his life seeking revenge on that beast. The crowd of 300 players continued to howl. all feeling insulted by what ego has just offered to them. How dare this man in tight khakis speak to them with such condescension? Where does one even find the chutzpah to speak ill of this sport? But then those howls begin to die out, leaving its echoes to remind each player of the moments that have led them to this room in the first place. Isagi looks back on what happened to them that day. He remembers the way his coach lied to their faces after they lost, telling them that the only thing that mattered was that they had fun that day. He remembers the cosmic irony of that, the tears that then streamed down his face, compared to the cheers and screams that were going around on the other side of the pitch. Is this what fun is supposed to look like? Losing and crying and shitting your pants and having to go home early? Look at us and look at them, and then tell me who the fuck is supposed to be having fun right now. Isagi's teammate lost them the game because of fun. His season is over, with no trophies, with no prospects to his future, and with no more chances to continue playing this sport. This moment is then followed up by a valley opening as Isagi becomes the first person to pass through those doors. Soon, a river of rage begins to pour through the gates, and soon, the series begins. The first examination of Blue Lock is really simple. The 300 players get split into groups of 12. Each group gets placed into a metallic room. In the center, there's a ball. The last person to touch that ball will be considered it, and in order to make it to the next round, all you have to do is not be tagged as it. Out of the 12 people that Isagi's been paired up with, a few of them catch his attention. A monk, a shark, a prince, a brain cell, and Ichigo. But out of all of them, there's one that stands out from the rest. Logic struggles to comprehend why that is, but instinct tells him that there's something off about this one. The first few seconds of the examination places a distinct line between the two kinds of people that lie in this room. There are those who wish to make it far into Blue Lock, and there are those who wish to topple its system. Half the room proceeds to hide from this white mass that's spinning around in this metallic place, while the other half has decided to use it as a weapon. Several players rotate in getting tagged, and within the last few seconds, Isagi gets hit. In front of him, he sees that a player has accidentally fallen from spraining their ankle. The room goes quiet, the clock goes down, and Isagi is left with a choice here. Should he take advantage of moments like this, or should he hold on to his pride? Should he go further into the blue, or should he go home being kind? And in that moment, he picks a third option. The strange player from earlier comes out of the blue and chucks the ball into the air. This archway guides Isagi's eyes over to a person that he didn't notice was in the room until now. It's the star player that made him lose the match. A sense of rage begins to take over. The feeling enters his sight, then into his body. Isagi strikes at the ball with everything he's got. The ball becomes a white fist, colliding itself perfectly with this stupid little face. Finally, the bell rings. The test is over, and Isagi has made his way onto the next trial of Blue Lock. In the next moment, he realizes what he had just done. A part of him seemed to have taken over during those last few seconds, and as a result, a first lesson from Blue Lock was taught. Allow me to venture upon an explanation. This is the main element that separates a sport from being either a pure raw competition to a game that is designed for entertainment. Scoreboards will tell you that the value of these numbers are the same, but human beings will remember each point differently. It's possible for a team to win but not actually feel like they've won, mainly because that feeling usually gets decided by the people who perceive that moment. On that day of the first match, part of Isagi thought about taking the shot, not because it's the most efficient play to make, but purely because of how he'd feel about it afterwards. I'm sure every person watching this knows what I mean. Scoring a goal or doing something incredible in a setting where dozens of people are watching you is like a moment of pure energy. It's like thunder to your limbic system. Moments like these are what make up the stories of a sport. It's the driving force behind the NBA, the NFL, and every single league that revolves around the movement of a ball and the human body. These bodies stand on fields that are basically canvases for art to happen. Each brushstroke is a movement, a chapter with a bigger, grander storyline. The 2022 World Cup Finals was never just a matter of either France or Argentina winning the game. It was about whether or not Lionel Messi could officially claim his throne as the greatest player of all time. It was the man who had been a legend for over 2 decades versus France's new machine that has been crafted to perfection. Can the unity of Argentina guide their king to victory, or will it be taken away by the goal-scoring freak of nature that is Mbappe? These stories inspire, bring confidence in others, and can send waves of emotions through people. It's why Isagi chose to go for the harder shot in the first exam. Whether it came from seeking personal revenge or from proving himself that he didn't need to cheat to make it further into Blue Lock, Isagi chose the option that was most important to him. In the same way a dancer uses silk to exaggerate their movement, and in the same way a surfer uses their board as a blade to cut through the natural events of the ocean, Isagi used this ball as an extension of his own desires. Kicking it at his stupid little face was a moment that was needed to be able to finish his own chapter. The 11 players that remain in each room are then formed into teams that'll play against one another in the next stage. After eliminating Blondie McGee, Isagi makes note of the faces around him. Behind each set of eyes, he finds stories that don't seem too different from his own. Their upbringing, their own set of losses, their grief, and their unending desire to make it far into these games. All of them seem to make sense, except for one. He then recalls what this guy did during that last play. He saw the way Isagi stopped himself from the easy way out and then claimed the ball from him. This put the guy at risk of being the last one out, but his expression was telling that he couldn't seem to care any less. It seemed like part of his spirit was compelled to do it anyways. The guy introduces himself as Bachira, telling him that he did those things because he saw something special within Isagi. In Moby Dick, it's what guided Ishmael to eventually come across his greatest friend, Queequeg. The first time they met, Ishmael was in deep fear of him. Rumors told him that he'd be sailing with a literal cannibal, a guy who eats people, is covered in more tattoo than skin, and carries a tomahawk that he smokes tobacco with. But as the nights go on, he also uncovers a deep sense of care and kindness behind the man. A connection begins to form between the two in ways that cannot be described through words. At the Harbor Inn, Ishmael goes to bed at first, fearing that the crewmate he'd be sharing it with would eat him. Instead, he's awoken by an arm that he describes as like the softest blanket he has ever felt. A friendship blooms between the two whale hunters. This bond becomes a warm color, shifting through shades of meaning and beauty and purpose. Together, their souls conjoin into one as a vessel. The winds aim them towards one single direction: the Great Blue Ocean. A second lesson gets taught to Isagi when he plays his first match with his new teammates. Ego designed this next stage of the examination with two possible ways to be able to make it through. You can either win as the top team in your bracket, or you can be the guy who scores the most goals on your team. This leads the beginning of the match into a state of complete chaos. Some try to come up with a plan on how to win the game, but most are aiming for the ball as a tool to score them the most points. Isagi soon realizes that when you place a bunch of strikers into a room and you get them in a state of panic, they will always fall back into their instincts. The sight in front of him is a jungle that would make Darwin proud, ranging between the strength of hippos, the ferocity of panthers, and a set of snakes that are waiting to strike at the perfect moment. But in this animal kingdom, one creature stands far beyond at the top of its throne: Shohei Barrow. If ego was a song, then Barrow wrote the lyrics. If violence was a monument, then Barrow was its architect. Without making a single pass, Barrow pounces his way through the pitch, leaps over to the ball, hits a rainbow over Isagi, a nutmeg to the next player, and pierces the ball through the net. Then, in the following scene, Barrow goes on to tell everyone that here in Blue Lock, he is the king. He demands them to kneel, and then tells Isagi that a soccer ball is merely just a spherical servant to him. The next play begins and annihilation ensues. A goal, another goal, and the scoreboard eventually arrives at a number that basically translates to "Pack it up, fellas." Hopelessness makes its way through Team Z as they all begin to believe that they have been confronted by an unstoppable force of nature. Teamwork and strategy has gone out the window, leading each member to acknowledge the fact that ego might have been right all along. Their training has made them weak. They're cubs to a lion. They'll never make it far in this world that only gives glory to the alpha. But in that sea of agony, Isagi finds hope in someone that he finally understands. 5 minutes are left in the match, and Bachira is staring at the ball with what can only be described as pure ecstasy. Topaz embers that to Isagi have gone from a mystery to now what is simply just joy in its most potent state. The whistle blows, and Bachira lets out a breath. This breath guides him to an opening. His movement becomes wind, and his mind becomes flow. The opposing team panics, leading a line of defenders to make their way through the pitch and attempt to strike at his path. But but this effort goes to waste. Bachira is in his element. All of this leads Isagi and the rest of the players to ask themselves, where did that joy of mine ever go? What made me stop being so curious? When did I begin to let go of this part of myself? He passes the ball to Ichigo. Along with it, confidence gets transferred over like kinetic energy. Ichigo strikes from 25 meters outside the box. It rips past the goalie, and finally, Team Z scores their first goal. The clock goes to 0, and Isagi's team has lost their first game. The outcome was unfortunate, but the goal he witnessed just now has made him come to a profound realization. Allow me to explain. Jason Williams was a strange basketball player. Throughout the span of his career, he averaged 10 points, 2 rebounds, and 6 assists. His height was only 6'1", and his stats alone would never be able to indicate that there was anything special about him. By the time he entered the league, the NBA was in the middle of an era known for being defensively favored and extremely aggressive playstyle. Hand-checking was still allowed in the rules, and Titans were the ones that dominated the game. By the end of each clock, scoreboards were at their lowest point average in decades, favoring teams like the Spurs and the Pistons for their military-like approach to the game. The sport at the time acted and played by the books. A guy like Jason Williams was, by design, supposed to be forgotten. He was half the size of the metallic giants that dominated the league, like Tim Duncan, Shaq, and KG, had nowhere near the same skill set as Kobe, Iverson, or Steve Nash. But every time he stepped onto a court, for some reason, at some point, it seemed like he decided this place was going to be no different from the backyard. In a stadium of thousands, a league watched by millions, Jason Williams would often jump into paint with giants and then come up with the most fucked up pass possible. Behind the back, off the ground, from the sky, and worst of all, the most brutal one he ever made in his career was from the elbow. In a game that took place in 2000, Williams did a play that started with him dribbling down a court. He stared off to his right, convinced the defender that there was someone possibly there, wrapped the ball around his back, and then passed it to the other side with his elbow. This was the way he played this sport for all 13 years of his NBA career. And there are two reasons why I think this style of play was poetry in motion. The first reason comes from Williams admitting that a lot of the influence in his play style came from the culture of pickup games. It was common for people to take a look at a guy like him, 6'1" and skinny, and prefer to not want him on their team. So instead, he honed in on an ability that didn't need raw strength and talent. In a recent segment with Overtime, he shows an example of this by showing to the host the difference between a regular pass versus one that's meant to perfectly align the seams of the ball to their hand. This thought process was then applied to all of the possible ways he can create opportunities for his teammates out of thin air. A pass can also transfer over confidence. The movement of this ball can also be a mechanism to send a message. But the other reason why I think this playstyle was so special was because of the freedom that he represented to the game. The NBA at the time was mainly in favor of mountainous giants that followed their playbooks, so to look at that and to have the audacity to think that any of these plays are a good idea is insane to me. It was the message to millions of embracing instinct over paper. It's this freedom that I think is a perfect example of the chemical effect that can occur between each player. When Bachira stole the ball from Isagi, he did this with the hope of setting him up for a more interesting play. It would have been more exciting for him and for everyone to see somebody resolve their storyline of revenge. But the same thing occurred when they were down 0-5. Everyone else had fully lost hope, but to Bachira, this was a chance to prove himself against a primal monster. His eagerness, his excitement, and his curiosity for the world was what ended up reminding his teammates the reason why they entered Blue Lock: to prove themselves, to win, to keep playing the sport that they love so dearly. It's players like Jason Williams that end up being so good at their craft that they manage to convince the people around them that they can fly. And it's players like Bachira that can lead you to understand why soccer was the sport that you chose. It's the way his movement gives him wings, the way he maneuvers around people like it's natural instinct, that eventually leads Isagi to ask a simple question. The following match leads Isagi to meet a clone of him, a guy who looks like a Portuguese water dog that claims to hold the same strengths as Isagi. Not special in any way, but a jack of all trades in the parts that matter. At first, he finds himself offended by this idea, but then that thought gets followed up by him thinking about his teammates, the way Bachira moves so freely, the way Chigiri makes it look like he could break the sound barrier, the way Ichigo can throw a shirt. A question pokes at Isagi: what is my actual strength supposed to be, and where am I trying to go within this chapter of my own storyline? It seems like everybody knows what they want, except for me. If I keep making it through Blue Lock, what's gonna happen at the finish line? What is the purpose behind what I'm doing? These thoughts get briefly interrupted as Isagi's teammates find themselves in their element. Confidence has become like an ember, with its flames rapidly spreading within each player, but their confidence slowly begins to wither out as the Labradoodle proceeds to place himself between their plays. Like Isagi, he has studied each and every single one of them, their strengths, their habits, their weaknesses, and he knows that his actions are capable of having an impact on the people around him. Through this cycle, he slowly manages to wither away at their capabilities. Their lead becomes lost, and the opposing team finally ends up in a position to kick Team Z out of the bracket. The room begins to close in, and the retriever catches them making another crucial mistake, except this time, he punishes them with a statement. The counter begins with him passing it over to his offense. They make their way through the main wave of defense. The ball gets passed. It lands on the right foot of the Husky. He stands now inside of the box. In front of him is a cage, and to the right of him is a player. In soccer, this is the most advantageous position you could possibly be in the sport. If this was chess, then it was basically checkmate. If this was basketball, then it'd be like making a wide open layup. It is the easiest shot you could ever make. It is so unbelievably, ridiculously free, but unfortunately for him, there is one man standing on this pitch who just so happened to have made this exact same mistake not too long ago. A day that, tragically, Isagi has made sure to never forget. Standing between their paths, Isagi stares into the man's eyes, his bushy eyes, and takes this moment as an opportunity to teach this dog a cosmic lesson. He tells him that they are not, in fact, two in the same. They are not two jacks of multiple trades, because the difference between them is this. One has the brains to make it far in this world, while the other has chosen to embrace their hubris. Isagi passes it over to his offense, setting them up for a goal and ripping the ball straight into the top corner of the net. Together, as a set of egotistical maniacs, they stand above this Australian Pomeranian mountain dog and announce their first win in Blue Lock. By now, it became obvious that each of these stages had become stepping stones for Isagi to grow. Hatred that was aimed at Blondie McGee had eventually turned into an emotion that he didn't know was floating within him. Motivation, ego, revenge, the answer by then wasn't clear. But I think these moments had eventually become stages for me to receive a lesson of my own. At first, the series seemed like it was spewing gibberish. Second, it became a show that my friend and I used as an excuse to catch up. It was funny to watch. All of the players wear skin-tight uniforms, yet Barrow walks around all the time like as if he has pockets. But third, after many weeks had passed and the series progressed, I found Blue Lock awakening a part of me that I thought I had lost a long time ago. It was in those moments where Isagi's losses felt like the end of the world, where I was reminded of the times where I once felt that way. Back when I was in high school, I used to play this niche little sport called water polo. Most people wouldn't even know what it is, but to me, it was everything. It was all I could ever think about. And there was a time where a loss did feel like dying. So seeing these extremes, these scenarios that were depicted as soap operas felt so validating to me. I often hear this get brought up when people talk about sports. On one end, you have deeply passionate fans of a particular medium, and on the other end, you have those who struggle to understand what the deal is. To them, it's a ball. To them, it's human beings screaming and crying for no reason. And I think a lot of that comes from these two people perceiving a moment in entirely opposite ways. One of them doesn't have context, so all they're seeing is the mundane reality of things. But to the other, the one who cares deeply about that thing, they have created an entire world of fiction in their mind. They're not just seeing a goal or a point or a ball. They're staring at lightning and the aftermath of someone's story and the evidence of humanity's existence. 10% of it is reality and 90% of it is fiction. It's these extremes that are the reason why we care about things, and it's these people, these far-gone lunatics that are the closest representation of those feelings that lie within us. The soccer player that literally has lion sound effects come up every time he does something. The poodle who can see everything on the pitch. The boy who has a demonic figure speak to him when he plays. The boy who once sought revenge on a system of teamwork. And the man who sought revenge upon a whale that once took a leg from him. For the remainder of the examination, Team Z is in a state of flow. Through the rest of the stage, we meet a whole new set of personalities. A guy who wears glasses to hide the fact that he's dumb, a set of twins who share the same conscience, one of them is nonverbal and the other one speaks for the other, and two players who end up becoming Isagi's most formidable opponents. Nagi is a 6'4" meta-human that is trying to achieve singularity through the sport of soccer, and the other one is his boyfriend. And just barely, Team Z manages to make their way through the third stage of Blue Lock. It's here where Isagi's team gets split apart from one another. Rather than playing as a team of 11, this next stage is intended to be a test of individual skill. From here on out, they'll be playing in teams of 3. For each game that you win, you'll be allowed to steal one of the opposing team's player. Through this process, Isagi scans the room to see who he could possibly pair up with. He first finds Bachira, and then the super mutant creature named Nagi asks to join them too. This breaks his boyfriend's heart. Then Isagi scans for possible opponents to face off against. Each face within this room begins to convince Isagi that he's seen it all. Those who are willing to cheat, those who are seeking to hunt, those who yearn to make it far into this program, and those who dream of becoming something more than what was handed to them. But in this room, he notices that there's one single person who seems to be staring off into a far place that nobody else can see. His eyes don't speak of mystery like Bachira's once did. No, it looks to be staring off into something far more sinister. Behind them, he finds the teeth of green crystals that lie deep within a cave of memories, each shard reflecting tunnels that lead to a past far more cruel than what the bounds of the mind could imagine. What is this guy's deal? What place is he staring off into? This player is listed as the highest ranking member of Blue Lock. Isagi's instincts tell him that he must go make sense of this, and so the trio of Bachira, Nagi, and Isagi decide to face off against a maniac. The first few minutes seem like they couldn't go any better. The bond between these two has gotten to a point where it feels like they could read each other's minds. That, combined with the fact that they're now teamed up with a supernova wearing a jersey, has led them to believe this trio was practically unstoppable. For some time, the opposing players aren't much, but still stand to be formidable. Within seconds, a first goal is scored. It seems like not even a stone wall could defend these three. Not even a mountain could prevent them from winning this game. And then the next whistle blows. Time slows down. Seconds become fragments. Moments begin to focus on the man that stands in the center of this pitch. And through those eyes, Isagi notices that the man has now decided to enter back into reality. Without a single ounce of effort, he shoots the ball from midfield and scores. Another play begins and he scores without a care for the universe. Again and again. And Isagi's understanding of soccer becomes shattered. All of the intricacies and strategies that he prepped for this game proceed to go out of the window as they soon come to realize that they are facing off against a black hole, a vessel whose sole purpose is to absorb all matter. Panicked, they make a change of plans and try to aim for the unexpected instead. Isagi switches up the patterns of his movements, Bachira amps up his pace, and Nagi attempts to reinvent his own playstyle. These efforts are then put to waste once Rin reads their move like as if they were children's book, like a hungry-ass caterpillar, like a huckled-up Barry Finn, like a diary of a wimpy fucking kid! It's here where Isagi realizes that these eyes were not meant for vision. They are the event horizon to all of hope. Once you have developed the thought of making a play, Rin is already aware of it. Once you turn that thought into an action and commit to emotion, Rin knows what you're gonna have for dinner next week. He is 40 steps ahead. He is so beyond the events of now that he only chooses to enter into the present for the lowest amount of seconds needed. The ball gets kicked out, and Rin's team sets up for a corner. Isagi rapidly paces through all of the possible options that their enemy could come up with. A long pass, a short pass, a running play, a far side play. What is he going to do next, and how can I counter that action? And then, Rin makes his decision. He proceeds to score a goal from the corner. The final whistle blows, and the opposing team decides to take Bachira away. Not only have they lost the game, but Isagi has now lost someone who is considered to be an extension of himself. Broken, shattered, lamenting, shitting his pants, Isagi lies there in defeat. Often, I find myself wondering what makes us decide things. What leads a human being to spend years of their life on a sport? As a kid or as younger versions of ourselves, we sometimes come across things that are as simple as a ball. The interest always seems to come from a primal source of curiosity. What is this thing in front of me? It's like a toy, a thing that activates some part of our brain that wishes to understand it. Intrigue then drives us to come back to it as often as we can, hoping to explore and discover new things about this world that we have found ourselves lost in. Loving it can sometimes turn into a long voyage, where the years go by, an ocean of events pass through, and then you end up finding yourself placed in a vague middle area of some nebulous timeline. I started feeling this way when I entered college, playing a sport that I once used to love. Back then, there was a pureness to the joy that it gave me. I had offered parts of myself, but it was always willing to give back more than I ever asked. I remember the first day that I started playing it. I don't know how or why I was aware of this, but to me, it felt like I knew this thing was going to permanently alter the course of my life. Many years later, questions began to wander around in my mind. Where even am I right now? I don't even remember how I got here. All I know is that my knees ache, my elbows hurt, and I'm just tired all the time. My memories of that young me are mostly gone by now. They're foggy, hazy visions of a person I used to be. And now I'm here, living a life that he chose for me a long time ago. It seems like the mind chooses and then the body follows. In pursuit of this natural route, the body eventually arrives at a midpoint where it struggles to remember how it even got there. I know when I began to start wondering this, it was when I met my own versions of people like Rin and Nagi, people who always seemed to make twice as much progress as me with half as much effort. Those moments honestly broke me. Not because I often lost to these kinds of guys, but because they represented how much my relationship with the sport had changed. I stopped playing this thing out of pure curiosity. I think I found this show causing a reaction in me that I don't think I've felt in a long time. As Isagi was using this ball as a vessel to progress his own chapter, I found myself doing the same thing with this show. Isagi represented that part of me that wants to go far, fully knowing that these ambitions have no right to feel this way. Most of the people that I've ever met who were great at something have usually described it in a way that made it seem like they kind of just stumbled upon it. They were born in a body that matched their ideals, and were given an upbringing that provided them with the tools to play at good programs. This effect hurts Isagi the most because there really is no feeling more insulting than your bleeding effort being incomparable to a person that doesn't even care to try. You're just dust to a gas giant, a 2016 Jetta to a Bugatti. No matter how many mods and spoilers and horsepower you add to your beautiful piece of German engineering, it'll never compare to a French piece of wizardry made out of lightning. But what is even the point of pursuing anything with that logic? Why set yourself up to any standard if all you intend to do is cry wolf all day? It's here where Nagi steps up to remind his teammate that there will always be a difference between losing and being a loser. Does the existence of a Bugatti prevent man from putting a spoiler onto the back of their piece of shit Civic? Can a man not hold on to his vast and broad dreams? Can they not stare off at a mountain and wish to peak its summit? Can an addicted gambler not find themselves lost upon a horizon of slot machines? Can a whaler not choose to set sail, be confronted by a whale, and realize that they have been binded by a white vessel of purpose and meaning? Today, Isagi has lost. Tomorrow, he's decided that he'll be seeking vengeance upon a whale. By the way, this leads me to the part where I just want to take a second to talk about a certain type of comment that I know is going to be under this video. I know it's going to happen. Actually, I'm sure you can scroll down right now, and I promise you, you're going to see someone making a big deal out of me calling it soccer. I get it. You're European. You're from South Africa. You live in the frozen tundra of Antarctica, and you take pride in the fact that over there, the sport is called something else. And really, I'm happy for you. I really am, and I appreciate you feeling the need to tell everyone else about your Europeanness. It's just a word. It's a word. No one cares. No one cares about which of our colonizers named what sport what. No one cares. A set of trials and tribulations get placed in front of Nagi and Isagi. The first one consists of having to face up against the Crimson Devil himself, Shohei Barrow, and after 45 minutes of venturing through Dante's Inferno, they eventually manage to tame him. This addition ends up causing a new problem to their team. Barrow admits to having never made a single pass in his entire life, and Nagi asks him if he's been practicing his kneeling. Isagi soon realizes that he must solve the impossible task of balancing two supernovas on your team. This fate is no different from what often occurs in big league sports as well. One of the more famous cases of this happening was back in 2020, when the Brooklyn Nets managed to pull a super team of KD, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving out of their ass. The immediate reaction to this was that New York was going to win the next couple championships because of this, but then tragically, the trio would go on to spend the next 3 years playing only 16 games together, mainly due to injuries and a bunch of off-the-court drama. But there are also cases where plans like this do happen to work out. In 2014, Barcelona had made the decision to sign Suarez, placing him now into a trio between Messi and Neymar. In that following season, they managed to win a Champions League title and then spent the next 4 years being labeled as the most overpowered trio to ever exist in the sport. How did that happen? The same thought process was then put into having Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe play on the same team. Two of them had already spent years playing together, and the other was considered to be the next generation's greatest player. But this idea would then launch itself out the window as Paris would go on to get knocked out in the first round of playoffs in both 2022 and 2023. In hindsight, I think a lot of this gets pointed down to the culture that exists between each game. Problems like these rarely ever arise from what happens on turf or on a court. It mostly begins with staff and the dialogue between practices. Pirate ships on average used to be around 100 feet long and 25 feet wide. Back then, it was a floating piece of suicide wood, sailing in oceans that were so unpredictable that everyone was better off assuming it was controlled by God. And the only conceivable way for human beings to traverse through all of this was if the ship could work harmoniously. Each vessel had a captain, gunners, deckmasters, chefs, and harpooners, and each venture was done with the intent of producing a miracle. It's here where Isagi comes to acknowledge the interpersonal effect that can happen between players on a team. Bachira's case was an example of enhancing the people around him, but it's possible for someone to be able to have the opposite effect. Confidence and egos are malleable parts of the body. In order to maintain control over it, one must be able to tame these parts of themselves. This then leads Isagi to come up with the solution here. He decides that he's going to put Barrow in his place. In their next game together, he proceeds to do this by stealing the ball from Barrow and then calling him a donkey. After this, he earns Barrow's respect. The next game, they go up against their old teammates, Ichigo, ex-boyfriend, and Chigiri. They sing their breakup song and move on to the next game, stealing the princess along with them. Finally, after 20 episodes of setbacks, 2 sets of 45-minute torture, and after weeks of sharpening and refining all the tools in his kit, Isagi has made it through to the last part of this stage. Currently, he has 4 players. All they need is to find one more to be able to pass through. The easy way out would be to take this box of talent and have them face up against the weakest set of players. You know, the ones that don't have color in their hair. But Isagi knows that they'll never be caught going out without a bang. His team knows that there's only one person left to face off against. There's only one single person that they're waiting to seek revenge on. As a mountaineer stares off into the peak of Fujimoto, as a gambler stares into the horizon of slot machines, and as a captain stares into the abyss of the ocean, Isagi aims his sight towards the green eyes that once haunted him. In this rematch, each player chooses to mark the opponent that they believe will provide him with the biggest challenge. Nagi chooses to go up against Rin. Barrow chooses to go up against what he thinks is an herbivore on steroids. Chigiri against a 7'8" giant mass of glamour and beauty. And Isagi chooses to face off against his greatest ally. The game begins. Behind both halves stand players who know their opponents like the back of their hand. Each one has spent weeks studying their habits, their strengths, and tactics. Isagi sets the tempo by stealing the ball from one of their plays. The tides shift, and Nagi begins to pave an opening for the rest of the team. Chigiri catches it, soars to the box, and scores it into the back of the net. Hope begins to rise, but Isagi knows what to expect this time. He believes his team holds the slight advantage over this matchup, but he knows that all of this is meaningless to the vortex that stands in the middle of this pitch. Rin is the messenger to humans that their existence is just a grain of sand in a cosmic desert. The next play begins, and the ball eventually makes its way to Rin. The sound of death echoes through the room. Isagi naturally begins to panic. After doing some galactic calculus, he stabs his way into Rin's path, hoping to narrow down all the options that lie on his hand. But midway through this motion, through piercing his leg into his proximity, he begins to realize for the first time ever that Rin has acknowledged his presence. What used to be a green mist has now unveiled itself to Isagi. Finally, after connecting all the pieces, all the mysteries, all the agony that lied within the oasis of his eyes, he discovers who Rin really is. Itoshi Sei's brother. A long time ago, rumors once spoke of two brothers that had an unbreakable bond. One was the yin and the other was the yang. One was the bread and the other was the butter. Sei was his bacon and Rin was his waffles. Together they were an unstoppable pair, pillaging through every kingdom that had been built upon the land of Japan. All the schools, all the age groups, and all the academies that were once considered to be facilities for producing their best players, the two brothers set them all into ruin. This eventually led them to be labeled as the greatest strikers to ever come from Japan. But at its core, this was also the issue. From Japan. After some time, this bond became divided. One went to Spain and the other stayed. Time eventually began to make their friendship vanish into something sinister. Years began to create two enemies. One was a rogue and the other was a king. Each had eventually turned their passion into vengeance for the other, each pair of eyes containing pools of agony, reflecting the realization that there's no room for the kids they once used to be. Isagi discovers that he's been placed in the middle of this mythos. The reason why Rin never had any interest in these games was not because of his ego, but because all of them were ants in comparison to the route that he was taking. Blue Lock was not a source of motivation. It was a tool for giving him one more chance to take down the throne of his older brother. The second half of his defense takes place. Isagi strikes at the ball, only for Rin to do the impossible as always. The game evens out at 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2, 3-3, 3-4, 4-4, and the pitch is about to implode. Adrenaline has spiked. Each player is now a planet. Giants that stand in each corner forcing the ball towards their own gravitational pull. Both teams have reached madness. Rin pours his every effort into making sure he does not lose this game. Cracks begin to open as Isagi becomes aware of the fact that Rin makes decisions purely based on the effect that it'll have on his opposing team. He doesn't think logically. He chooses the actions that are designed to accelerate fear. It's why he often tends to shoot from psychotic angles. It's why he puts himself in the middle of all of their plans. In his mind, the game revolves around him. He is the main character. They are the NPCs. The clock proceeds to leave only room for one last play. For this, it is all or nothing. Each and every single player on this pitch has never concentrated so hard on one single task: placing the ball into a cage. It's this simple task that has led their bodies to be in a state of complete exhaustion. Every movement, every action sends the most painful signals to their mind. Thinking has become a long-lost concept. Bodies are moving purely based off of instinct. Isagi makes his way, desperately trying to make the tides go in his favor. The ball eventually makes it to the outside of the opposing team's box. An opening gets given. He shoots it and it gets blocked by Rin. The ball then lands upon Bachira, leading him to play this sport in an unrecognizable shape. His movement is a dance. The ball is like silk, extending and moving into the exact position that his mind desires. Bachira shoots, and right when it seems like the game is about to be over, the most intense game of Blue Lock is finally about to finish, Isagi, with the tiniest touch, manages to block it. The ball launches itself up into the ceiling. All eyes are staring at its arc. The players have done everything in their power to make it to this point. Now, all that's left is for fate to choose who wins this game. The ball sinks, and Entropy chooses Rin. He shoots the ball. It arrives at the back of the cage, and Isagi loses the match. It took me a while to understand the impact that the Rins in my life had on my own pursuits. Each time they represented a part of me that I feared most. Half that terror came from the realization that no matter the effort, there will always be someone else who was born a galaxy away from you. And the other half came from me realizing that my relationship with sports had drastically changed by that point. Once as a child, I picked up things because I wanted to be an explorer. A ball was a toy that I could learn things from and understand parts of myself better. But after a while, this sphere became a vessel for my own competency. I used its ability to make me win and lose as a numeric value. Being better at moving the sphere around reflected my humanity. Winning became the measurement for myself. When did this happen? When did winning become a part of that equation? When did I stop being an explorer and instead chose to aim for a finish line? Whatever happened to just playing something for the sake of playing? I guess I was trying to ask where my curiosity for things had gone. The first season of Blue Lock ends with an overwhelming amount of hopelessness. Isagi finds himself at a loss for words on what to do about it. 2 years later, the second season came out. A lot of me was excited for obvious reasons, but a part of me was also wishing to see a specific outcome from this loss. I wanted to believe that hard work and grit and tenacity was enough to make someone like Isagi go far in this world. I didn't want to face the harsh reality of anything else. I wanted to come out of this season with a sense of hope. As the first episode aired, this hope then turned to dust as I stumbled upon a fate more tragic than anything I could ever imagine. Worse than Rin beating out everyone. Worse than a theme about talent beating hard work. Worse than whatever this is. The animation of the show got so much worse. Unbelievably worse. Everything was just PNGs moving. Every sequence looked like manga panels that were directly drawn into color. My best friend couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Isagi was met with a loss that a Shakespearean tragedy could only dream of. The series suffered a fate worse than what the 9 layers of hell could even come up with. The result of a studio mistreating its animation staff with its scheduling and unrealistic work conditions. Episodes went by meaninglessly. Weekends were spent with us going down a masochistic experience. Our minds wanted to see what happened next, but our eyes had to pay the consequence. I felt like a fool. A fool that forgot how common this happens in the animation industry. A fool for forgetting how much of a miracle it is for this world to come across an incredible adaptation. It's a common outcome for anyone that's ever fallen in love with this medium, but I believe I found myself feeling more attached than usual because of how closely I felt connected to its message. This anime had become an extension of my own desires. I wanted it to be a piece of media that could prove what I believe to be possible, that if you care and put enough of your heart into something, the world will take you far. This outcome was a spit to the face on that belief. The world is a cruel and unusual place. It doesn't care for people like Isagi, who tried their hardest to prove themselves of something, only to now be forced into being on the same team with the guy he hates most. It doesn't care for people like me, who just want to see a teenager with dreams to make it far into the sport. I find myself stuck in a well of dread, as each sequence laid out PNGs that were moved by a mouse on a screen. The corners and sides contained wind effects that were supposed to confuse my eyes into thinking it was looking at motion. This dread also seems to get shared by Isagi as he struggles to understand where to go from here. At first, the main motive was to try to figure out a way to topple the system of soccer. After some time, the top of that mountain became Rin. But now that he's lost his opportunity to ever beat him, it's impossible to find meaning in anything. Even though he's made it this far into Blue Lock, he cannot stomach the idea of someone forever besting him. If that's the case for merely just this program, imagine the battles he'd have to fight outside of Japan. Imagine the things that lie beyond the horizon. This belief then gets transferred over to my best friend and I. For me, I wanted to give up on the show. It was trash that I didn't even want to look at anymore. I read manga. I read books. I don't watch stupid shit with stupid messages. But my friend, on the other hand, was holding on to hope. He began to make a running joke that the show was just saving its budget for the second half of the season. But I knew that was impossible. I've watched far too much anime to ever be ignorant enough to think that there was ever in the history of ever a guy waiting to press a big red button called the good part. Right? The series continues with Isagi developing a small sense of imposter syndrome about everything. He makes it through the last stage of Blue Lock and gets chosen to play on the starting roster of 11 players. On there, he finds some old friends, some new faces, and an enemy that has now led him to develop a conflicting understanding of things. There's no chance for him to get revenge on anything anymore. There will never be another player that represents so much of what he despises. With this, Isagi finds himself with a sense of emptiness. He then realizes that this is probably the exact same feeling Rin has for his brother. Rumors once spoke that Sei came back from his academy in Spain as a totally different person. Isagi wonders what could have caused this rift between their relationship. Then he wonders what kind of soccer must exist out there for someone to change this much. What's gonna happen to Rin if he loses against the Japanese national team? What then? Would he keep playing? What happens if I lose and I have to stop playing the sport that I care so much about? He looks back on that day that led him to go to Blue Lock in the first place, questioning if he was maybe being too harsh on that guy that missed the goal, or maybe even the coach that cried in front of his team. After everything that's happened, Isagi still finds it hard to pinpoint what was the thing that drove him to take things this far. Was ego right all along? Was it revenge? Was it hubris that drove me to this point of my life? Was his name supposed to be a metaphor? These questions are then put to an immediate stop as the big day arrives. The second season of the show reaches its halfway mark and provides us with what was promised at the very beginning: the battle between Blue Lock and the Japanese national team. The Spear of Ego facing off against the Shield of Teamwork. Behind this team stands 11 of the greatest players in Japan, formed around Sei but captained by a man named Oliver. Often he gets credited for the military-like approach that has shaped the workings of his ship. A set of nerves begin to kick in as Isagi finds out the amount of seats that will be filled in this match. In the background, Ego has managed to bring in investors and sell more tickets than the country has ever seen. He pitched it as the most brave idea in the history of soccer. The stadium is filled with seats made out of curved plastic, designed for thousands upon thousands of humans to sit inside a grand space, all to bear witness upon a single moment. A moment shared with the 22 human beings that are best at moving this ball around a room. Genuinely, Isagi finds this thought frightening. He discovers that his parents showed up, alongside friends and loved ones and fans of all the players that will stand on that field. How did a guy like me even end up in this place? Why did they put me as a starting player on this team? What happens if I mess everything up? What happens if we lose? Where will I go after all this is over? Isagi sets foot onto the Emerald Field. Along with it, the questions begin to vanish. In turn, they become echoes, eventually replacing themselves into the sound of his calling. It is time for the next episode to begin, and it is time for Isagi to finish the job that he once started. It's hard to describe what the moments before the first whistle feels like. Off would be the best word I could come up with. There's something off about this show the moment that episode begins. From Isagi's perspective, he makes note of the shift in tone of the people around him. Faces that, in a microsecond, turn from a shade of nervousness to pure intensity. Eyes that are all darted towards the white object that stands at the center of this pitch. But even as a viewer, it's hard to also not feel like something had changed within the root of the show. Bit by bit, the animation style began to look different. The first whistle of the match blows. Rin leads the kickoff by passing it over to Isagi. The players go on to prove why they deserve to stand there, each of their movements painting a picture, a story of their struggles and convictions one had to have gone through to make it this far. But this play soon gets stopped by Team Japan. No one on their side is saying a single word, but they're all somehow moving perfectly in sync. It's like nothing Isagi has ever seen before. They play like as if they're all connected, cells serving to a bigger organism, steered by its captain Oliver. Blue Lock struggles to find an answer. They then leave Japan with an opening. A pass gets made outside the box, guiding their main forward to take a shot. The ball attacks, but just barely gets stopped by the keeper. Hope would lead one to believe that this is a good thing, but fate has decided to leave this ball in the hands of none other than Atoshi Sei himself. Standing inside the box, Sei holds onto the ball from the deepest angle possible. Focus gets pointed towards the people he could possibly pass it to. His teammates make their way to the center. But before anyone else has a thought, Sei proceeds to shoot it from his first touch, and like magic, the ball hugs the back of the net. Silence follows, then cheers, and then a whole lot of questions. How in the fuck is that even supposed to be possible? This single moment stuns the entire team of Blue Lock. Even I was left stunned, mainly because of the play, but partially because of that strange feeling I was getting from earlier. By this point, something was starting to feel very wrong here. The animation style had become significantly better and different than how it began in the season, but it didn't just stop there. The appearance of the characters looked marginally different too. Something about Isagi's face seemed off at times. Bachira's too. Maybe I was just overthinking everything. But then I started to notice that some of the characters were turning into what felt like versions of themselves from a parallel universe. Some of the new guys from the season began to talk weirdly. They started speaking through like dialogue metaphors. This wasn't even a thing before. One of them at one point just starts talking through improv slang where he's like, "It appears you have straight-manned my bit." Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Rin tells everyone to settle down. The next whistle blows, and the nerves begin to wash away for Blue Lock. Now that they understand the circumstance, instinct has taken over. Isagi and Rin move forward as one, followed up by the spirit of a madman behind them. An opening gets made, and Rin finds himself in the exact same position as his brother a few minutes ago. His teammates call for the ball, but Rin decides to go for the exact same shot instead. It hits the post and bounces off into the air. Many move towards it, but most are staring at the moment. Nagi looks up at the thing that's flying above him. Before, he used to think it was merely just a ball. Now, after playing with people like Isagi, he has learned it can also be a tool for creating feeling. The ball sinks, he catches it, and Nagi decides to produce for himself the most ridiculous goal possible. Soon after, the stadium goes into an earthquake of energy. People go absolutely nuts, drinks get thrown around, fists go up in the air, and TVs become the center of attention for millions across Japan. They couldn't believe the thing that they just witnessed. This goal served as a reminder for what Blue Lock came here to do, not to compete against the Japanese national team, but to overthrow an entire system. The tides have changed. The next play begins. Now on this pitch, both sides have begun to take this game seriously. Each player starts to get into their element. Team Japan makes a strong start, but Blue Lock takes the lead in making their move. It seems like everyone has had a chance to make a name for themselves so far, except for one person. That person's hunger goes far beyond the realms of this pitch. That person is Rin, who decides that he'll be the next one scoring a goal. The game is now 2-1. The clock reaches halftime, with each team going back to their lockers. Isagi can't believe the moment that he's in. There's actually a chance for Blue Lock to take this home. They're actually gonna do it. He begins to envision an outcome after this. The teams that could come his way once they win. The contracts he'd be signing after graduating. The statues they'd built upon his high school campus. But these visions become blurred as they become met with a new problem. Japan has pulled out their wild card. They have decided to add in an actual serial killer to their team. And unlike Ego, that is not a metaphor. The national team literally found him held in a straitjacket located in a room made out of stone. The show, from my perspective, proceeds to get so beyond weird. The anime starts placing insane VFX into everything. Don't get me wrong, Blue Lock has had its dramatic moments up until this point, but never to an extent like this. The players are now turning into spiritual creatures of themselves. The dialogue has become fully nonsensical. The next play starts and they animate the serial killer turning into a pink dragon butterfly thing that plays the sport of soccer in the most aggressive way possible. The field has become a mythological battlefield, and Isagi cannot understand what he's looking at. The shields and spears have switched positions. Japan has become the offense. The ball gets passed over to Itoshi Sei, and the world realizes how this was the player that broke Rin. With grace, with beauty, with elegance, he nutmegs his brother. Then Itoshi Sei turns into a wizard, teleporting across realms, appearing out of thin air, phasing through their lines of defense and making the ball appear into the back of the net. It's one thing for Isagi to meet someone who is 10 steps ahead of everyone else. It's another to bear witness upon a person who can bend reality to their will. If the universe was the outcome of trillions of variables, then Sei was the one who created them. After this, I shit you not, the show begins to convince me that I am in a hallucinatory state. The animation by this point has become unrecognizable. The serial killer scores a goal that is directly a reference to Zlatan's most famous shot in his career, and then he proceeds to sing an opera about how soccer is a sexual experience for him. The ball entering a cage is like a... Yeah. Everyone is fully out of their mind. The events of this pitch have entered into a plane that is beyond Isagi's understanding. The players on Japan have transcended. The players on his team are now in a state of complete ecstasy. The crowd has broken the sound barrier. Blue Lock has lost their lead, and time is starting to run out. Isagi's ears are ringing. His senses are overloaded. His mind is in panic, struggling to get a grasp of the events going on here. A tsunami of questions take over. What happened to Oliver? He looks insane. What happened to Rin? What happened to Rin? The line between fiction and reality has become blurred to Isagi. The players around him have now manifested their figures into their deepest and cruelest desires. The pressure of this game has made Oliver fully lose his mind. After spending years carrying the weight of Japan on his shoulders, he has now become a heartless creature. Soccer to him is now just a series of computations that need to be solved. If the country needed him to die today to win them this game, then that'll just be another variable to this equation. Barrow has been hit with a similar realization. Once he confessed that his deepest fear has always been the idea of feeling stuck in place, existing meaninglessly as an alcoholic fan watching a sport that he once played and loved. As a result, clarity has provided him with the realization that he'd be willing to kill to achieve his own dreams. Shido and Sei have given in too, embracing the nuclear pressure of this game. In turn, they've now become pure diamond. But the one who has been affected the most by this moment is Itoshi Rin. His figure has now become completely unrecognizable. What used to seem like a person filled with stoic ambition has now become a primitive creature blinded by rage, a homunculus to their own revenge. And it's through all this, through this animation of colors, through the insanity of events happening on this pitch, that I think I was finally able to connect the pieces together. This show began with me believing it was just going to be a story about one's ego. But after all this, after more than 30 episodes of following along this bizarre journey of an ambitious blue-haired boy, a guy who plays soccer with a person who believes they can hear demonic voices, a guy who literally believes that a ball is a spherical slave to him, a poodle who can see it all, a boy who has fully lost his sanity in pursuit of being better than his older brother, and a convicted soccer felon who is convinced that playing this sport is no different from a sexual experience, I think I was finally able to understand the meaning to all this. And not just for this season, not just for the show, but to all of it. Everything. Ever. If you'll allow me, I would like to venture upon one last explanation. Some time ago, I read a book that was called The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. It's a small little book that I'm not even going to pretend like I was able to process that well. For 200 pages, it talked about a whole lot of complicated philosophy stuff, but there was a sentence in that pile of words that I haven't been able to ever let go of. It said that great feelings take with them a universe of their own, splendid or abject. To me, this sentence means everything. To Camus, these absurd feelings can deeply affect our own perception of things. In our minds, there's a universe of jealousy, ambition, selfishness, and all the other extreme emotions we have. It's a concept that I don't think I have ever been able to see more clearly than, and I mean this so unironically, when I watched Blue Lock, an anime about high schoolers that play soccer, an anime about teenagers breaking the bounds of reality just to be able to score one more goal. I think the things outside of us are like a bland sandwich of typical boring mundane things. Reality day to day is just not really that exciting. But if that is the case, I think feelings is where colors begin to get placed onto that canvas. The interior of our bodies is where a solar system of emotions can be found. It's where feelings go off into realms that extend beyond any form of understanding. This is where empires get built, continents get shaped, planets get destroyed. It's a jar that's filled with thousands of thunderstorms, held on by a Dasani plastic bottle cap. Naturally, this catastrophic amount of power sometimes spills out into the exterior. It aims those strong and potent and absurd feelings onto the world, hoping to fill this gray dull area with colors that provide meaning. This process is crazy and confusing. It could lead a deranged captain to spend the rest of his life chasing after a single big mammal. It could lead a man to risk his life out into the ocean only to be its sole survivor that came back, and it could lead people to find themselves caring deeply about the randomest things ever, even something as pure and simple as a white circle. I think a lot of people would be surprised by how little a sport ever has anything to do with the actual sport. Back when I played water polo in college, we would sometimes spend weeks practicing the same thing over and over again. Naturally, when they placed me into that part of the process, I would sometimes mess up. I would miss a pass or do something wrong and make everybody else have to start all over. And I remember there were times where I did that and I'd be surrounded with looks that you could literally never find in any other aspect of life ever. For a microsecond, these people actually wanted to kill me. I could see it in their eyes, and they were picturing like the most violent thoughts possible. And I know this was the case because I was doing the same too. And it's not like any of us ever wanted to actually do that, for the most part. But there were people on that team that were like my best friends now. There are people on that team who might even be watching this video now. Love you, Jimmy. But what I'm saying is that this phenomenon, in the grand scheme of things, is a really strange thing that we humans do. Every day, our team of 25 people would walk into a room, pick up a ball, and then fuse it with some of our most powerful emotions we have ever had in our entire lives. And that's only just the players. That's not even acknowledging the people that are experiencing this exact same process by witnessing it. It's for this reason that I think Blue Lock is the most accurate depiction of this phenomenon to have ever existed in media. It's not based around strategies that people really use in this sport. It's not possible for a soccer player to grow wings and then nutmeg 5 people in a row and then time travel their way into a goal. But it is the actual experience of playing a sport. The visceral hunger of wanting something so bad you would rather die than not have it. The scar tissue from absolutely embarrassing yourself in front of dozens of people. The world-ending dread of possibly losing a game. And the mind-shattering realization that you will never be as good as someone else. It is these extremes that are the closest shape of our actual emotions. The great feelings that we use to create our universes. Life has always been about that. Placing color onto the blank canvas of everything. The answer has always been this ball. It will forever be this white ball. Everything that has ever mattered exists within the traces that we have put onto this ball. The scores between both teams are tied. A minute now remains left in the match. Air has escaped the room. Pressure has taken its place. Bases in the millions begin to rise from their seats, desperately waiting to witness the mechanism that will complete this moment. The players on this pitch have never placed more focus onto anything in their life, as much as the ball that stands in front of them. This object holds the keys to their greatest desires, reasons that have served as compasses to their souls, roads that were paved in a time that they can no longer remember. Trails of blood have been scattered across this pitch. The adrenaline on most of the players have completely worn off, leaving them to return back to their normal state. Minds have become flooded with signals of exhaustion. The only people left with any remote amount of energy here are the 2 brothers, the serial killer, the captain, and Isagi. A second proceeds to pass, and the world holds its breath, waiting to see which one of these people on this pitch will rise to the occasion. The first one ends up being Rin. His figure is still unrecognizable, a zombie guided by its most primitive thoughts. He claws over to the ball, desperately hoping to label himself as the man that has put an end to this game. A win wouldn't be enough. It must be him whose name will be reigned as the best over his brother. He strikes at the ball, and just barely, his lifelong dream had almost been made into a reality. The ball hits the post, then glides up into the air, and then the tides of destiny proceeds to choose its worst candidate. This person makes everyone realize that the player you should always fear most is the one who always seems to find themselves at the right place at the right time. Blue Lock begins to drown in terror. The wizard proceeds to pass through their entire defense, each attempt hopeless, each movement predicted, magic tricks made out of nutmegs, impossible turned into possible. At last, Sei is confronted by his brother, both now knowing that the following moments will become their last dance. The ball proceeds to move and rotate on its axis. Most will only ever understand what it's like to separate themselves from a ball, but few in this world will spend their whole lives mastering the craft of magnetically attaching themselves to it. Sei is one of those people. The 2 of them play out the final act to their story. Sei, running off of his most refined instincts, uses the move that has always been meant to crush an opponent's dream. He is the reason why Rin played the way he did in Blue Lock. They both have spent years honing in on a craft that was designed to send ruin into another player's ego. But for the first time in his life, Sei fails to do so. Finally, he is forced to meet eyes upon the monster of his own creation. The ball floats in the air, too high for any of the players to reach and too high for the crowd to feel anything but amazed at this sight. It's funny how this ball seems to have an effect on people, yet up there, it just looks so helpless. A piece of leather that's barely even holding onto itself. Isagi finds himself lost in the moment in front of him, not even as a player, but just as a fan. For a fragment of a second, everything feels so still and so quiet. Thinking about that leads him to regain his composure. It allows for his body to make note of the way the wind connects itself to his breath, the way the air has been passing through his skin and fingers, the tapestry of details that have always been there but were never noticed. He looks back on the moments that brought him here, the pain that was once inflicted upon him by people like Rin, the past that was sent over to him to meet Bachira, the revenge that he took upon that dumb blonde face, and the shot that was missed for him to end up in this crazy, massive, confusing field of grass. The game is tied, only a few seconds are left on the clock, and the ball is in the air. To most people watching, this second felt no different from any other, but to Isagi, it became the second when the universe had sang to him its melody. All of the events that have ever occurred begin to coalesce into a single moment, where Isagi finds himself peeking into a lens that he was never able to see before. The answer never had anything to do with ego or vengeance or achievements of anything. The answer has been and will forever be this ball, the ball that has now entered into his sight. Isagi begins to transfer over every single spark of energy that remains from his mind into his right leg, and with all the power that he has ever held on to his life until now, places it directly into the core of this white sphere. The ball becomes a bullet, piercing itself through the last line of Japan's defense, through all the things that have ever stood in his way, and through the very system that led him to be here in the first place. The net snaps into an implosion, time is run out, sound escapes the room, and Isagi realizes that he just won them the game. This silly little game of kicking a ball. Once again, a lot of what makes these videos possible are because of sponsors like War Thunder, so thank you. I wish AdSense was a sustainable form of income, but it's just not, so I appreciate the fact that they let me do this. Feel free to check out the link in the description of the pinned comment below to sign up an account today. Even if you haven't played in the last 6 months, your account is still available to earn the new bonus package for PC and consoles, including a bunch of new vehicles, in-game currency, and a 7-day free trial. All the best. Oh wait, also, editor Alex here. If you want me to continue being able to make these massive, high-effort type of videos, then please do feel free to check out the Patreon. I put an insane amount of effort into posting videos on there about how I make videos, answering whatever questions you've got for me, and you'll also be a part of a Discord server where I'll be hopping on a stage call exactly 1 week after this upload. This is me now actually parting ways with the video. I love you guys, and hopefully we'll cross paths again in this vast ocean of time. Bye-bye!